Alright, welcome back everyone. This is Chapter 14, Revolution and Nationalism, Section 2, Totalitarianism, and we will also take a case study into Stalinist Russia today. This lecture was originally given on April 17th, 2015, and here we go. So, the main idea for today's notes is power and authority. After Lenin dies, Stalin seizes power and transforms the Soviet Union into a totalitarian state. We will, I should mention, also talk about generally how totalitarian states operate, and that's kind of the first thing we will go into here. Now, a government of total control. Now, totalitarian leaders are often very interesting people. They are dynamic, they're persuasive, they bring people over to their side very frequently, and they give countries direction. They give them a place to go and things to do. And most totalitarian leaders, who are generally dictators, unfortunately do this through terror, scaring the crap out of people, indoctrination, educating them in ways that support the country, propaganda. Again, we've seen that in previous chapters. Media that persuades people of certain opinions, and they censor things very frequently that go against the ideals of their country. They also will often persecute religious and ethnic minorities to dominate their country. Now, totalitarianism is one of your vocab words. It is a government control over every aspect of public and private life. I like this little poster down here because it says, "Good citizens don't think." In fact, what good citizens do under totalitarian regimes, like North Korea, like Russia, like Communist China, is they don't think. Because thinking leads to reasoning. Reasoning leads to right and wrong leads to revolt. And revolt, as we know, leads to bad citizens. So, again, we will see how that kind of rolls out here as we go along. Now, totalitarian regimes often use something called police terror. This is terror and violence that is carried out by a police force. Terror and violence are often something used by totalitarian dictators to basically force people to obey them. If you step out of line, they send the police to deal with you. Now, they will also use these special police to carry out these terror and violence acts instead of having to do it directly or through, say, the military either. Now, many also have these special police spy on their citizens, intimidate them, or in some cases murder them to maintain control. It is not uncommon in a lot of these totalitarian dictatorships to have police show up at your doorstep 3 o'clock in the morning to find out why you, for example, said something last week that was against the dictator and somebody mentioned it to them. So, yeah, police terror is very frequent. Now, totalitarian regimes also use indoctrination. Things like propaganda and censorship are very frequent. Indoctrination basically just means that a government is shaping the education of its youth and young people. They are giving slanted and untruthful education. So they show up and say, look, you can teach these things, you cannot teach any other things. If you teach other things, that's your head. Okay, so that's indoctrination. It's very controlled and specified education to forward the goals of, say, a government or political party. Now, propaganda and censorship are also very common. Governments generally under totalitarian regimes will have control of all mass media, radio, newspapers, television, that kind of thing. And they will generally crush opposing views, and they censor anything that comes outside or does not agree with the government. Okay. In general, totalitarian regimes also will frequently use religious or ethnic persecution to maintain control. So totalitarian leaders will often brand religious or ethnic minorities as enemies of the state. They frequently will kill or commit acts of genocide against these people. And these minorities, if those things kind of don't happen, are some. This isn't the subject of our case study today, is Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany focused a lot of laws on the Jewish people, and of course we know, events like the Holocaust came out of that, which we will talk about when we get to World War II. They generally will force these people to live isolated from the rest of society, or will kill them in many cases as well. So religious and ethnic minorities are frequently persecuted. Now, let's look at a case study how Stalin builds a totalitarian state in Russia. He uses a lot of these things that we have just looked at, and because Joseph Stalin wants to create the perfect communist state in Russia, he is going to plan to transform Russia into a totalitarian state and use a lot of these sort of techniques to get Russia to that point. Now, he is going to begin by destroying his enemies, both real and imagined. I should just point out that it would be easy to say that Stalin is just a little bit crazy during this period of time in Russia. Now, let's talk about the first thing, Stalin's police state and the Great Purge. Now, Stalin's police suppressed a lot of protests with force at his lead, of course, and they spied on everyone's phones, mail, and other communication. So Stalin was greatly aware of what was going on in Russia, down kind of to the micro level, to individual people's lives. Anything that came up as kind of concerning, he was immediately notified of, and a lot of times that would lead to problems for that person. Now, these people are often arrested and killed, and millions of so-called traitors are taken care of in that manner. Anybody basically that Stalin or the Communist Party was not happy with was, they were finished. So not so good for them. In 1934, Stalin starts this thing called the Great Purge, which is the eliminating of many of his enemies in the government by killing or exiling them. That is one of your vocab terms. It is a campaign of terror in the Soviet Union during the 1930s in which Joseph Stalin sought to eliminate all Communist Party members and other citizens who threatened his power. Now, it is estimated, and these are kind of low-end estimates depending on how you look at it, but it is estimated that 8 to 13 million people died during the purge by 1938, when Stalin had wrested complete control of the country to himself. Now, he also uses, of course, in Stalinist Russia, propaganda and censorship. Stalin's government controlled, of course, all the newspapers, radios, movies, and any real mass media. So it all, of course, glorified the state of Russia. Artists are censored and controlled, so anything that they put out must glorify the Communist Party, the regime of Russia, or in fact Stalin himself. So you see paintings like this one on the bottom right here, where children are adoring Stalin. You see a lot of movies which show the greatness of Russia. You see a lot of newspaper articles which are clearly journalism that has been overlooked by the state and is a bit swayed, let's just say. So that is very frequent. It is not uncommon for artists or journalists or what have you to be silenced, let's just say, if they ran afoul of the Communist Party. So there is censorship, and censorship can sometimes be very violent. Educational indoctrination and religious persecution were also very common in Stalinist Russia. Students of all ages were controlled in their education under Stalin. They showed up and gave a curriculum that they could teach or that they could not teach. And if, again, you ran afoul of the curriculum, you did not teach the things they wanted you to necessarily teach, you may not have a good day, and in fact may have your last day. Children learn the virtues under this educational system of the Communist Party. That is, a lot of the curriculum is how awesome this Communist Party is, how awesome communism is, how awesome the general workings of communism are compared to things like democracy and capitalism. And so teachers and students who challenged the party were, of course, punished. Now, religious persecution was very frequent, and Stalin's government specifically attacked the Russian Orthodox Church. Magnificent churches and synagogues were destroyed, of course, and religious leaders were sent to labor camps and or exiled or killed. People lose all of their personal rights and freedoms during this time, so that if you had wanted to go to church or synagogue or mosque or what have you, you were not really able to do that. And frequently, even though there may have been elections in Russia, you were not allowed to vote for your leaders in many cases. So not a lot of personal rights and freedoms for most people. Now, Stalin also seizes during this time control of the economy, and as Stalin gained control, he also changed the Russian economy, feeling that Russia was behind. And we have seen, and it is absolutely true in this particular case, that Russia was behind. They were not well industrialized during the First World War, and they struggled in the times following the First World War, even up to the period of time where Stalin is taking control. Now, because of this, Stalin is going to try to basically take direct control. He calls for this thing called a command economy, where he and other state officials can control all of the economic decisions made by the Russian government, or Russian, well, in Russia. Okay, so command economy is one of your vocab terms. It is an economy system in which the government makes all economic decisions. So Stalin was very literally kind of the puppet master of the Russian economy during this point in time in history. Now, the USSR's Industrial Revolution was also kind of taking place during this period of time, and one of the particular things that made it push forward very quickly was called the 5 Years Plan, or the 5-year plans, rather. Stalin calls for several of these things called the 5-year plans. These are basically economic plans outlined by Joseph Stalin in 1928 for the development of the Soviet Union's economy. That is actually your vocab definition down there. He wanted to get the Russian economy kind of up to par with Europe and America, and this is going to be part of what kind of gets them there. Now, these plans set extremely high goals to increase steel, coal, oil, and electricity production, as well as several other things, but those are kind of the major ones. And while these plans generally worked, we should point out that so many resources were being put into these things that consumer goods were very limited, and people often went without food or other needed goods during this time. So life was difficult, although Russia was making great strides. Okay. Now, there was also during this time kind of a Russian agricultural revolution, and in 1928 the government creates these things called collective farms. These basically are large farms owned by the state where hundreds of people work together. They are, collective, so that makes sense. And while peasants who had owned these farms before, some of them worked, some of them also resisted this change. They did not want to have these farms taken from them. They didn't want to have them combined into these large farms. And something like 5 to 10 million farmers or peasants die in this crackdown. So there is a great deal of human sacrifice going on here during the creation of these collective farms. Now, by 1938, agricultural production had almost doubled from 1928, so great gains were made, but there was a lot of human life lost in this process. Now, collective farms is, again, also one of your vocab terms. It is a large government-controlled farm formed by combining many other small farms and having people work together there. Okay. Here are a couple of charts showing kind of how the 5-year plans, as well as the agricultural work went, is here as well. Coal production, of course, increased greatly. You have something 30 metric tons in thousands per year to something like 130 metric tons in thousands per year. Steel production goes up modestly, but is not amazing during this period between 28 and 38. The agricultural revolution was, you can tell, a little bit more shaky. In the first 5-year plan, we see, livestock production go down sharply. This is probably due to kind of, the pains of creating this new agricultural system, as well as various other economic issues. But it did increase or go back up in the second 5-year plan, so the second one was a bit more successful in that point. Wheat and other crop production was generally pretty good during both of these, although you'll notice again much more shaky during the first plan, better in the second one. Now, daily life under Stalin and women gaining rights. We want to talk about both of those very briefly. So